now I'll tell you a story. So I have a good friend, one of my best friends. He's older. He doesn't listen to the show, so I think I can call him older. And he's in his 60s and he's thinking about retirement. We were driving through Park City and he was going on and talking about financial stuff and talking about annuities. And he was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, they're terrible, right? I said, and I said, I'm like baiting him, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, hey, could you do me a favor? I was like, what is an annuity? And he looked at me and goes, I have no idea. I just heard they're bad. I have no idea. I just heard they're bad. And that's really the age of 2024, right? Like if we're a headline, culture where, we see one thing on the news and it's real, or, we don't read anything. We don't fact check anything. It's just, hey, I've heard this and it just is how it is. And the finance industry knows this. If we put enough bad press out there, I mean, people say like, why there's so much bad press? And I'm like, well, before I explain that how annuity works, I always say, all right, here's the reality. The mutual fund industry is $1 trillion industry. The annuity interest is $1 billion industry. It means it's hundreds of times bigger, meaning they have hundreds of times more dollars, which means they know, obviously, that they can put a lot more articles and information on the interweb. But what they're finding, and the reason they hate, like, why do they hate annuities so much? Because annuities replace most financial advisors. That's why. It's the short answer. It's like they can't charge 1%. They do all the work for them, and they are more effective in most cases for obviously the right kind of client. And, Randy, we don't necessarily use them for income planning per se, but we do make them to make people's plans very predictable and very stable and consistent. And people always say, oh, I want to make my obviously retirement the exciting part. I want to make my investments the boring part. And annuities do that, right? Like, I'm confused. Most people are pretty fiscally conservative in the Midwest, right? Like, or across the country, frankly. And from a fiscal conservative standpoint, like they don't like to take a lot of risk because they've worked for 25 or 30 years to build this nest egg. They don't want to be like, all right, now let's put it on the blackjack table. But that's exactly what you're doing when you put it in the market. And people are like, well, you don't understand. Over time, it always yields 8%. I'm like, yeah, over 60 years, you got about 20. What if you're on the front end of a down, that could be a really catastrophic effect on your life savings. So when I try to, get them going, I want them to understand the why first. Before it's easy, like, here's how annuity works. Like, here's why. When you write annuity business, they make less money because they can't charge 1%. Almost 90% of financial advisors are an AUM model, meaning depending on how many dollars you give them and how many of those dollars go into the accounts that go in the stock market, they charge a percentage, period. And if that is their model and you take money out and buy a CD, they hate CDs too, by the way, unless they sold them. So they hate CDs. They hate, obviously, money markets. They hate all of those things because they can't get paid for them. No one's going to pay someone 1% for your money to sit in cash. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to charge them 1% to put your money in a money market. No, of course not. So they don't get paid for those type of accounts. So these are the things that, at times I think you have to really dig in and understand what's going on. And when we talk about annuities, we in my book, Fire Your Financial Advisor, there's a chapter called The Secret Weapon. And it talks about the old Winchester rifle is actually where it begins. But then we talk about how, the fixed index annuity is been perfected over the last 20 years. And it's why it's broken every record there is. There's more fixed index annuities for the last 2 years. Every month is a record-breaking month. And the reason is simple. The interest rates are up now, so you can get, pretty reasonable, fixed rates. And it does everything a retiree really wants. It never goes backwards. It's got principal protection. So no matter what, if the stock market crashes, your money just stays flat. It doesn't grow, but it doesn't go backwards. And then it has some upside. So it's not just like a CD where you just get your 3 or 4%. You can, get 8 or 9 or 10% now. So if the stock market goes up, you could ride up to a certain point, and then it's capped. And that's the give and take, right? You have a capped return, but you have a floor that doesn't go below. And most people are like, yeah, that's what I want. Because at the end of the day, it's like you don't need 10% returns to enjoy your retirement. You just can't lose 40%. And that's really what annuities are doing. They're replacing bonds. Bonds are complicated. They're expensive. They're not liquid. Annuity is a tax deferred. A lot of ways, people, how would you describe it? It's like a fancy tax deferred CD, meaning, it operates with a lot of similarities. It's not just like a CD, obviously, but it operates in the same way. You can have it be fixed. You can have it ride the market. But unlike a CD, it grows tax deferred, meaning you don't pay any taxes on your gains until you take money out, which means your gains and your interest works for you. You get interest on interest before paying tax. So that makes it a very tax advantageous tool for retirees that don't need the money right away. But also, it's just simple. Like, hey, it's 5% a year. Got it. Done. All right. I know I'm getting. And that's not to say you have to put all your money in one. Obviously, that's not what we're saying, but it is nice to have that to be part of your portfolio. And I think that's how Gold Reserve views it. We have money in the market for our clients. We have money in obviously cash equivalents, and we have money in annuities. Like it's pretty easy to break it out once you see what they do. And there's a reason more and more people are buying them. And I think people are starting to become wise. Like, hey, were there some bad annuities? Yeah, bad mutual funds, bad stocks. I mean, some people sold some bad annuities. You just got to make sure you have a reputable, obviously, person regarding anything you're doing, whether it be picking your stocks or picking your annuities. And a lot of them are just pretty vanilla, straightforward. Hey, here's the floor, here's the ceiling. Let's go. And I think that makes sense for people, Randy. That's what retirees want, is to have predictability and certainty in retirement, not the roller coaster of the market.